Welcome back to the first video in a long time. I know it's been too long, but hopefully I'll be a little bit more consistent with these. If you're not familiar with what I do and some of the videos that I've made, essentially I run a company that builds Power BI reports for businesses that use Odoo ERP. And in the past year, I've helped over 20 companies move all of their reporting from Odoo directly into Power BI. So what I wanted to do with this video today is actually just show you step by step how you can build an invoice sales report like this one here. So it's going to be 2 pages. This one is just the invoice sales detail page. It's going to have your revenue and your quantity, all of your sales by product category and customer. And then this page here is just going to be for you to see your top products and your top customers. Now, my goal with this video is that it is literally going to give you everything that you need within an hour. So I've actually seen Odoo implementation companies charge upwards of 2K for something like this, but I want to show you how easy it is, but also how powerful it can be when you can get something like this up and running. So without further ado, let's jump into it. So in previous videos, I've kind of just gone over a dashboard that I've developed in the past, and I've ran through the functionality and kind of how they work. But in this video, I really wanted to start from scratch and take you through the whole development process. Now, a couple of things to note is that we're really just reporting on revenue here. So I haven't included any margins or costs or margin percentages or anything like that. That's only because the way that Odoo handles costs in accounting in version 18 is a little bit complicated. It actually requires you to link the stock valuation to accounting, which is very difficult to do without SQL. So that would take a lot longer than 60 minutes. So I've decided to leave that for another video. But I still think this will be super useful. If you want to follow along, there's just a couple of things that you'll need. The first one is you'll have to download Power BI Desktop on your computer. And then the second one is you'll need an Odoo database that you can connect to. Now, if you don't know how to do that, I have done a video previously on how you can connect. Essentially, it's going to be determined based on your Odoo hosting type. So once you figure that out, you then have 3 options. The first one is that you connect to your Postgres database directly. The second one is you connect via Odoo's API. And then the third one is that you use a custom connector. And that's the way that I'm using in this video. I'll be using a BigQuery connector, and I will leave the link in the description below. Essentially, you just need something where in Power BI you can connect to, and it will show you all of the tables in Odoo's database, and then you're pretty much good to go. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Let's jump into it. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to identify all of the tables that we need to build the query. Now, this is just going to make it easier. We're going to go through, we're going to list out everything. I might actually do it in a little to-do note to keep track of. This is just all the ones Odoo generates. Odoo tables for invoice sales query. Okay, I'll keep that in a separate tab. Now, the first thing we're going to do is we need to activate the developer mode. Now, the way you do that is you go to settings, scroll all the way to the bottom, and then hit activate the developer mode. Cool. Now, I'll show you what that does in a sec. But the data that we're concerned with for this query that we're building is all of our customer invoices and our customer credit notes. Now, that's all going to live in accounting. So if I go in here, the data is going to be contained in customer invoices and customer credit notes. That's it. So let's go into customer invoices, and I'll quickly show you what developer mode does. So if we just hover over the invoice reference column, you'll notice that there's a little pop-up here. So now that we've got developer mode enabled, we can see the field, which is name, and the model, which is account.move. So account.move is actually the table, the table in the database, and then the field is actually the column name in the database. So if we were to go in, and I'll show you this in a second, we will see a table that's called account.move, and then within that table, there will be a column called name, and that's going to store all of the references for the customer invoices that we've processed. So now if I just jump into an invoice and now hover over customer, you'll then see that we've got a partner ID. Now that's going to relate to the customer, which is here, that we've actually got assigned to that invoice. And same with invoice date, due date, and all these other fields here. So These are purely going to be in the account.move table because that's the header. So this is just stores everything that we need to know about our invoice. Now, if you hover over the actual product line, you'll now notice that the model is account.move.line. So this is going to have, what products did we sell? What's the GL code? How much of it did we sell? What's the cost of it? All that sort of stuff. Now, as you can imagine, there's going to be multiple lines per invoice. Well, there can be in this case, we've just got one, but there will be instances where there's multiple lines per invoice. I'll show you why that's relevant when we actually get into developing the report in Power BI later. But for now, we're just trying to find the tables that we need just to make it easier for ourselves before we develop. So we know that we need the account.move table and we need the account.move.line table. So we'll go make a list of that. So we need account.move, account.move.line. Cool. So it might actually be easier if we just figure out, well, what are we actually trying to find? So we're trying to get all our customer invoices, our customer refunds. We need detail about our products and also about our customers. So at the moment, we've already got everything we need for our customer invoices. Now we need to get our customer refunds. Now it's quite easy actually. The refunds are stored in the same table, but just to check, we can go over here and we can see, yep, they're in account.move. Now the way we differentiate, I'll tell you do that later. It's just a column name, and we just filter it. But I will show you that later. So we know we've got the tables that we need for customer refunds. Now let's look into our products. All right, so if I go into an invoice, let's just go into an actual invoice, a bigger one. All right, so let's go and let's hover over a product. Now what you'll notice is that the field name is product ID. So when you see an ID, you know that that's going to be a number field. Now that's going to be stored in account.move.line, obviously, because this is the invoice line. When we go into that table, and it'll make more sense later when I break this down, we will see that for invoice 2026 number 2, there will be a specific product ID linked to that line. Now that might be product ID 123, but we're not actually going to have any information about the product itself. We're not going to see that it's a 4-person desk or that it belongs to the desk product category or anything like that. The way we can find that information out is by adding a lookup table. Now, the way you do that is by finding where that information is actually stored. So all we know now is, okay, we've got a product ID, which is 123, but we don't know anything about that ID at all. So what we have to do is we have to go into products, and I usually go into the list view, makes it easier. And then we hover over product name. So here you'll notice that all of the information about our product is stored in product.template. Then if we go into a product, we can look around, we can see, all right, that's product template. This one's product template as well, but it's actually linked to a product.category table, which you can see by that little relation field down the bottom. I'll explain that later. And yeah, so everything we want is in that product template table. So let's go in and let's add that to the list. All right, so now this is a little bit of a tricky one, but there's also some product information that's stored in a table called product.product. I might be able to see if I can find it here. I can't. Anyways, I'll add that to the list and I'll explain it a little bit later. So we need product.product. And then the last thing we're going to add is the product category. So that's going to be in that product.category table. So I'll add that to the list. All right, so we've listed down all of the tables that we need to retrieve the information regarding our customer invoices, our customer refunds, or our credit notes. And now we've got everything for our product, so we can tick that off. Now, the next thing we're going to look at is the customers. So exactly the same as the products. Once again, if I go into a customer invoice and then I hover over the customer, there will be a partner ID field. So within the account.move table, there will be a column name, which will be called partner ID, and it will just be a number. We won't know anything about our customer, anything about what customer industry they belong to, anything like that. So we have to get the actual customer lookup table, which has all that information. So if we go into customers, once again, we hover over it. It's going to be stored in a table called res.partner. Now, this is a table you're pretty much going to be using for every one of your reports, or the majority of them. So I'd become pretty familiar with res.partner. And if we click into it, let's just see if Odoo's given us any fields, any other fields that might be relevant. So we may as well get the res.partner.industry table as well. And let's just assign them to a random one so we have some data for that later. All right. Do we need anything else here? I don't think so. So we'll go over here and we know we need res.partner and we need res.partner.industry. All right, so I think we've pretty much got all of the tables. Now, if we head over to Power BI, I'll show you how we can get them out of the database. All right, so now we're in Power BI. What we're going to do is we're going to pull out those tables we just listed from our Odoo database. So the way you're going to do that is going to depend on the way you're actually connecting. I have done a video previously on the different ways you connect. Essentially, the first one, which is quite rare, which is connecting to your Postgres database directly. The second one, which is connecting via your Odoo API. And then the third one, which is the way that I'm going to do it in this video, is using a custom connector. Now, the custom connector that I'm using is a BigQuery connector. So if you go over to get data, I'll also leave the link to this one in the description. We search for BigQuery. I'm going to connect to that. Now, this connector just allows us to only retrieve the data that we want. So I've already gone in and I've selected those tables that we listed down. So if I click on this, we will see all of those tables eventually. Now we will select those and we want to pull these into Power Query. So we'll do that by selecting Transform Data. All right, so these are all of the tables and it has all of our data with no filters applied to it at all. The next thing is applying those filters and applying any transformations so that it shows us only the data that we're interested in. So we know we just want to see customer invoices and customer refunds. Now, that's going to be stored in both account move and account move line. But as they stand currently, they have a lot of data that we're not interested in because it shows that, I mean, as they are at the moment, it's got customer invoices and customer refunds, which is what we want. But it also has other data from accounting like vendor bills, vendor refunds, payments, journals. Now, all of this we want to filter out. And I'll show you how we do that in just a sec. But the first thing we're actually going to do is we're going to join the invoice lines table with the invoice header table. So that, because really, all we want from the account or the account move table, which is the header table, is the invoice reference, the invoice status. So whether it's in draft, whether it's been posted, maybe the invoice date as well. So the way we do that is by using the move ID column from account move line. If I go over that, move ID. So this is actually the invoice that that this invoice line relates to. And then that's going to match to the ID column in account move. So if I go over to ID, that's going to match to this column. So whenever you see an ID column, and this might not make too much sense at first, when you see an ID column, you know that that's unique. So there's only one ID that has 58, one with 54, one with 49. However, if we go over to the move ID column, say if we use that ID of 58 as an example, here there could be multiple lines because that invoice ID could be related to, well, this table here is only showing us invoice lines. So if there's 3 invoice lines on one invoice, then that invoice header is going to show up multiple times. All right, so we know we're mapping those 2 columns together, so we can click Merge Queries. I'll just show you how I did that again. So you go over to Home, click Merge Queries, account move line and account move. And we know that we want the move ID column, or we want the ID column from account move. There it is, ID, and then we're going to match that with the move ID column. Now I'll wait for this to load because this should show a perfect match because we haven't applied any filters to it. Cool. So you see how the selection matches 139 of 139. That means we've got a perfect merge because obviously it's going to be perfect because all of those invoice lines that we're merging relate to one of those invoice headers. We click on merge and then we're going to expand this whole table. It's going to be an absolute monstrous table. This is why it's a lot better to do this in SQL because all of these are, a lot of these columns aren't actually relevant. All right. Now, the next thing is I'd usually rename this table to account move and account move line. Move line. And just for the sake of this example, let's create a folder or a new group. Not required. So now we know that we don't want to use this account move table anymore because it's already been joined into here. All right. So the next step is then figuring out, well, how do we want to filter this table? So we know we want to see customer invoices and customer refunds, but how do we do that? And how do we know which filters to apply? So the way you do that is actually by going back into Odoo. And if we go into customer invoices, there's a pre-filter here for invoices or receipts. So receipts we're actually not worried about, so we can get rid of that. But you'll see that this is already filtering us, and it's showing us how we filter the Odoo database only to show us customer invoices. So the way we do that is using this move type column. So we know that in the account move table, so the header table, there's a column name called move type, and there's also a value called out invoice. So that shows that whatever line it is a customer invoice. And then we also want the credit notes. So once again, you'll see this little filter here. Type is equal to customer credit note, which is that move type column equals out refund. So let's go into Power BI and let's apply that filter. Move type. You'll see there's in invoice, in refund, and entry. So entry being journals, in invoice, and in refund, that being vendor bills and vendor refunds. Okay, so we've applied that filter. Now, what else do we need? Really, the only main thing is this status. So we don't want to include stuff that is in draft because we're reporting just on sales here. So we don't want to be including sales that actually haven't been processed because they might never end up being processed. So how we find out what that filter is go into an invoice, hover over this. You'll see that the field equals state. So that's the column name. And because this is on the header, we know that it's in the account move table. And as you can see down the bottom, it's got draft, posted, or canceled. So obviously we don't want anything that's been canceled and anything that's been in draft. So we can filter that state column for everything that's been posted. So we can find that account move state column. Here it is. And then we can get rid of that. And now it's going to show us everything that's been posted. Cool. Now, the only other thing to note, and this one's not as important, it just makes it easier on the eye, is that say if I was to go into this customer invoice and I was to add a note. Actually, this one's already got a note, so it's going to work out. So this follow-up with customer note is actually going to be stored in the account move line table as a note. It's not going to have any information that's relevant to us at all. So we want to actually filter that out. And the way that we do that is through a column called display type. Now, if I go over to Power BI again and we look at display type, now because obviously this is a invoice line we're referring to, it's going to be in the account move line table. And then we can see the three options here: payment term, product, tax. Because we're only interested in sales that have actually been attributed to a product in the invoice line, we can filter both of these out and we can just see products. Okay, so now that we've got those filters applied, the next thing that I would do is try to make this into a table that's a little bit more readable. At the moment, we've got a lot of data and a lot of it is completely useless. So first off, let's actually figure out, well, what is the data that we need? So as we mentioned, we've got customer invoices, customer refunds, detail about our products and our customers. What else do we need? Well, we also want the date it was invoiced. Possibly the date it was, for invoice sales, we probably don't need the date it was due. We're going to need the products, customers, amounts, and the amounts is going to be pre-GST and inclusive of GST. What else? I think that should pretty much do us for now. All right, so where do we find the date it was invoiced? Well, that is super easy. If you go into customer invoices and we look at invoice date, hover over that. We want the date column. So easiest way to do that, go to home, click choose columns, and then choose columns. Now we want to select the date. Now we also want the product. Now, as I mentioned, that's going to be living in the product ID column. Find that, you hover over this, you can see it's in product ID. And as you can see, the relationship is product.product. So that's how we're going to find the information relating to the product later. So we want to get the product ID column. Then we hover over this to find the customer. It's the partner ID. Partner ID. And we also wanted to see the amounts. So the way you do that is go back to customer invoices. So tax excluded is amount untaxed in currency. And then if we want the full GST amount, it's going to be the amount total. And then I realize we're also going to want the quantity as well. So let's figure out where that is. That's going to be here, which is the quantity column. Now, one other thing is we want to know, well, is it an invoice or is it a refund? Because there's a little bit of a trap. Move type. Yeah, so we're going to get the move type column in as well. So you notice now it's so much easier to see, but the trick to the reason that we get the move type is that you'll notice that the quantity is all positive. However, when we're reporting on it, the credit notes should show a negative value for the quantity. So we don't want to overstate the quantity because we haven't changed that column. Now, I'll show you how we can actually just do a simple formula which says if the move type is out refund, show a negative quantity, and if it's an out invoice, show a positive quantity. But that's all good. So we've got everything in here now. The next thing to do would be to change the data type for all of these. As you can see, they're all showing up as text at the moment, which won't work. So if you select all of those and then hit detect data type, you'll see that changes all of these values. We might actually just organize these so it makes a bit more sense. So amount, GST, GST. All right, so that's all looking pretty good. So now that we've got our invoices and our refunds set up, the next thing we need to do is get our product lookup and our customer lookup tables done up. So we actually know, okay, well, what products and what customers do these invoices relate to? Okay, so there's only really one trick here, and that is that you'll notice there's a product and a product template. Now, as you might have seen before, if we go over to customer invoices, and we go into a customer invoice, the relationship here was product.product. So that just means that the product ID column that we pulled into our account move and account move line table actually relates to product.product. Now, it doesn't relate to what we pulled in here where everything's in product template. Now, that'll make a bit more sense in a second if I show you this. So essentially, these two tables are very similar. They just hold slightly different information, but both of these tables have one row per product. So we can actually merge these two tables together. Now, the way that we do that is, once again, using these ID columns. So in product.product, there is a column called product_TMPL_ID. So that stands for product template ID, which refers to this ID column here. Wherever it is here. So that refers to these columns. So these two tables should have exactly the same amount of rows. So if we go in and we merge them together, once again, we should have a perfect merge. If we look at, find the template ID, and then we'll find the ID column here, merge these together. 58 of 58, perfect. So we'll click OK. And then once again, we'll expand all of these columns. So this is another monstrous table. Now we're going to do the same thing as we did previously. where we're going to say, okay, this product template table is no longer relevant for us, and this is our product, and product template. Actually, I might just make it easier, and let's say this is our product lookup because it's got everything related to our product, and this is now our invoiced sales. Okay. Now, let's figure out, well, what do we actually want to see in our product table? Once again, let's go into Odoo. Let's go into our products, and let's do a list view. So really, we want to see the product name, which is the name column from product template. We'll do a name, so our products, see product name, product description. What else? Don't need to worry about sales price or anything like that. Product category, we're going to do that in a second. So really the main ones here is we want to see our product name. Oh, we also probably want to see our product code, which if I go back to Odoo, see if Odoo actually has a, so it doesn't look like this Odoo instance has a SKU reference. Most of the time you will, so I would add that as well. But at the moment, we're just going to make do with the product name. Oh, it does have an internal reference. So default code. So we want the default code column. Default code. Then we also want our name column. And then we're also going to want our product category ID. You'll see that we've got that categ underscore ID column. So we want to pull that in so that we eventually join that with our product category table so we can get that information. And I always get in the active just so you can filter out archived products if you want. And just a quick reminder that you'll notice there's some double ups here. For say product will have an active column and product template will as well. Now always use product template for that. And that is pretty much everything that we want. Oh, and we also, an important thing that we want to get in is the ID column from product.product, because that's how we're going to link it to the invoice lines. So because we joined it from product, we use the ID column. And that is pretty much it. Okay, cool. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to get the product category. Now that's as easy as just joining. Well, I mean, we can change this table, see what we want. So the complete name, that's our product category. So let's get that. So we want the ID column and then we want the product category name. That's pretty much it. So let's just get those, ID, and then we want the name, complete name. Great. So once again, we could do this using relationships in Power BI, but for the sake of this example, it's just going to be easier if we have them all in as little tables as possible. And it will make it less confusing for you later as well. So the ID column is going to relate to the category ID column. Once again, there should be a perfect match. If there's not, it means that you have selected the wrong columns. So just pay attention to that. So 58 of 58. Once again, we're going to expand that. And now we've got our product category, change the name. Product category ID, we really don't need that column anymore. Okay. Good. All right, so now we've got our product category, which we can actually move into the irrelevant column. Now the final step is actually our customer lookup table. So once again, let's go into Odoo and let's see what information we want to find out about our customer. So the most important one's going to be the name. And one thing to note with this is a lot of the time, well, you're going to have contacts that are living amongst your customers. I mean, within a customer, you'll have invoice or accounting contacts, delivery contacts, all that sort of stuff. So just keep in mind that those live inside the same table. So the way you combat that is you get the ID column, which is the res.partner ID column. You can get the commercial partner ID, which is the actual ID of the customer. It's not a contact. And then I usually get the commercial company name, which is the name of the customer, and that way you just know it's not the contact. Because a lot of the time that would just be a random person's name; it won't actually be the customer. So let's filter those out. Good. So we've got the commercial partner ID and the ID column. All right. So that's pretty much it. Okay. So now that we've got all of our tables filtered and in a way that makes it super easy for us, we're going to go over here and we're going to close and apply. So this is going to pull in all of those data tables into Power BI. This might take a second, so I'll check back once it's done. Okay, that's done now. So next thing, we're going to go create our data model. Now, you click this little model view button here, and this will spit out all of the tables that we just pulled in. Remember that there's a few tables here that we're not interested in. So the way that we're going to get rid of those is by hiding them here, because we don't want to see them later and accidentally pull those fields in to our report. So product category we're not interested in. Res partner, we should actually rename that to customer lookup. So we do want that. Product template we're not interested in. Account move we're also not interested in. Just want these here. Okay. Now, super easy to connect these tables together. We've got our ID column, and then here we've got a product ID column, so we know that's exactly how we match them. Now, the way I always format my data models is keeping the data tables down the bottom and the lookup tables up the top. So if we click on product ID and then we match those, and then same with our customer lookup, we're going to have a partner ID. That's going to link to our ID column from res.partner. Perfect. And it is literally as simple as that. So now we have everything we need to actually build the invoice sales query. So let me show you how you can go in and do that now. So let's get a table. We want to pull in our invoice sales date. Might change the date of that, so it's more readable. And then we want to pull in our customer. So commercial company name. Personally, I would usually recommend using a date dimension table, a calendar. And actually, I might go in and add that in now, just so we do best practice. And I'll check back in a second. Okay, so I've gone in and added a calendar table. It's as simple as literally going in, and I'll leave the M code for this calendar table that I use in all my reports and in the description as well. Essentially, we go in, we select blank query, click home, advanced editor, and then we paste that in. And then that's going to give us all of the information for each of those days. Then once we've applied that, it's as simple as going into your data model, just for the sake of this example, because in our calendar table, we have a unique column because we have all of our individual days from 2021 onwards. We can then link that to our invoice sales date. So we drag that in here. Obviously, there will be some invoices that occur on the same day. So this should be many, and this is going to be one because that date column is unique. All right, so now we're into the part where we actually we can build our query. So the way that we do that is, instead of using the invoice date here, we actually can just pull it directly from our calendar table now. So what else do we need? So we said that we wanted to see our customer, so we can pull that in, change that to customer. And then we also want to see our revenue and our quantity, a pre-tax amount and all that sort of stuff. So let's pull that in. Rather than just grabbing it from the tables, let's actually build a couple of measures. What I would always recommend, and I've recommended this in previous videos as well, is to build a measures table. So that's as simple as adding a table here, loading that in. Now you'll see that down here. And when we click new measure, say for revenue, which is going to be our pre-tax amount. So that's going to be the sum of our amount with no GST. And then we're going to want to format that as $1 with no decimals. And then we're going to want a quantity actual, which equals the sum of a quantity. And that's just going to be dollars. All right, so let's add that in. We've got the quantity and then we've got our revenue. And let's, just for the sake of the example, let's look at move type. So as you can see, where it says refund, the revenue is a negative amount and the quantity is still positive. So this quantity number actually isn't correct. Now, the way that I would usually do this is I would do it in the SQL query, but you can do it in a number of ways, either by adding a custom column in Power Query or just by doing it in DAX. So let's just do it simply in DAX first. Let's go into our Invoiced Sales query. Let's add a column and let's just call this quantity actual. And we're just going to do a simple if statement, which says if the move type equals out refund, which means it's a credit note, return the negative quantity. Otherwise, just return the quantity. Cool. So now we just have to go in and change our quantity actual column. So rather than using that quantity, actually use quantity actual. As you'll see, that now changes all of these values to what we want. Alrighty, so now we've got that, we can probably actually get rid of our move type. And one thing I did realize is we actually don't have the reference column. So that's the invoice number. Now, how do we add that? Well, we can go back into Power Query, go into our account or our invoice sales table. We can go back up to our step and we're going to figure out, well, what column do we actually need? So we go into customer invoices. We look up this column here. So we know it's the name column. So it's as simple as adding the name. And we might make sure that it's from the account move table because that's the invoice header. We'll add that in. So invoice reference, could change the column name of it. And then we will close and apply that. Okay, so that's just loaded in now. So what we can do is we can go pull that field into our table, invoice reference, got our quantity, we'll make this a bit smaller. And let's add our product information in. So we'll go to our product lookup table. What do we want? We want the category, product category. And then we want our product code, our SKU. And what else do we need? We can add product name in there as well. You notice it's formatted quite strange. There is a super easy way that you can get rid of that purely just using if statements. But let's just leave it there for now. Okay, so our table's pretty much come together now. And I guess the only next step is I'll just double check that we haven't missed any columns that we need. But that's pretty much it. All right, the next step is just making this not look so ugly. So first thing I'd usually do is change the canvas background to a light-ish color. Maybe we might make it this type of color, transparency. Then I usually just change this to something like minimal. Looks a bit better. Let's just decrease the font size a bit. All right. And then I'd usually just add we want to tell people what it is that this table does. So we can make that fully white, border, gray color. Yes. Then we might add a text box which just says invoiced sales. And then we'll just add a logo We'll just add in my logo, my company logo. Let's add that one in. All right. Invoiced Sales. Okay. That's already looking a lot better. Then we might also change the grid lines so it's not so ugly. There you go. I mean, this really isn't important. It's just about making it look a little bit better. And then we'll change the column names, change this to product name, product category. That's got everything. Okay, so now we're actually going to check the data in our Power BI report against what we have in Odoo. Now, this is a super critical step because a lot of the time, it actually won't match, and that's just because you've either missed a step, or maybe you've missed a filter that you should have applied, and the data won't be wrong. So if you were to skip this step and you were to just pass this out to your sales team or management, they're gonna have some questions, and you're gonna have some frustrated people. So definitely don't skip this step. But all right, let's check this. So as you can see, we've got 446K, which from what I saw in Odoo, that seems very excessive. But let's check anyway. So we go into customer invoices. We'll change this filter so it shows us both invoices and refunds. We'll change that to is in custom invoice, customer credit note. All right. And then we'll filter out the stuff that's in draft. So because posted, and there you can see, so 15,000, that is a big difference. Now, the first thing that I would check is, do you have multiple companies set up? So because I'm using demo data, they actually do have 2 other companies. And if I was to go into one of those companies, you can see that this company has 130K, which shouldn't be shown in the report, but it's being shown. All right, now let's check anything else. First, I would just go in and I'd have a look at an invoice. If we just look at this invoice, if there's anything peculiar with this one. So we've got this invoice is 19,250. And if we look at this, you'll see that it's appearing twice. So what's going on? Now, first step, let's go in. Let's tackle that company issue first. We know there's another issue, something to do with the sales value, but we can do that after. So the way that you deal with the company is there is a table called Res Company, but we're not going to add that just for the sake of time. But what we will do is we'll go to the invoice header table and we'll get the company ID column. Okay, so you can see here that we've got a company ID of 1 and 2. So if we just go over to, say, this invoice here, let's see if that exists in Odoo, in the company that we're concerned with, and it doesn't. So that means that we want to filter out everything in company ID 2. We'll filter that out. All right, so that's got rid of a lot of rows. Now, also what I've seen is that we're pulling the amount total and the untaxed amount from account move. See, that's actually not going to work, because that means when we have an invoice that has multiple product lines, it's actually going to double up the invoice amount. So if we look at one of those, for example, do we have any here? 2026, I might just put that in descending order so we can see it better. So this invoice, for example, you'll notice that the total that we will be picking up in our report is 19,250, and that's actually being picked up twice. Now, if I was to look at that, we see that that should only be 19,250. So that's actually incorrect. Now, the reason that is because we're picking up the amount from the invoice header rather than picking up the amount from the individual lines. So what we're going to do is we're going to change that. So we're going to pick up the price underscore subtotal from account move line. Change that. Okay. And we'll make sure we change that to a whole number. Otherwise it's going to be saved as text. Transform that. All right. Now again, remember with the quantity how it was a positive value for every row. Now you can see it's done the same thing. So once again, we're going to have to change that as well. But let me close and apply those changes and we'll go from there. All right, so that's loaded in, but as you can see, all of those revenue actual figures are positive, even if they're credit notes. So what we need to do is we need to do the same thing that we did for quantity. We can just copy that column, make a new one, and then just change the quantity value here. Now you can hold Control-Shift-L and then change them both at the same time. So we need to change that to the price subtotal column. Oh, yeah, just change that to revenue actual. Okay, then we need to change our revenue actual measure to be pulling from the correct column. Revenue actual. All right, now we're at 98,574. Now you'll see I also just applied a out invoice filter here. So now we've got 15,824. Now let's just check if that matches what we have in Odoo. And we want invoices or receipts. That doesn't look like it's actually pulling in the credit notes anymore. So we need to filter that for customer invoice and customer credit note. And there you go, 15,824. Double check that that matches, and it does. Happy days. Okay, now that we've checked that the data matches, let's just do some final transformations to make this a little bit better. We'll add a date range filter. Get rid of the slider and we'll get rid of the background on this. And then we'll just make these values a little bit smaller. All right. And then let's add a product category filter. That'll drop down. This value is a little bit smaller. As you can see, we only have one product category here, but if we had a lot of them, we could easily go in and look at, which products are we selling the most of, and then we'll add a customer filter, commercial company name, customer. I'll just make that identical. All right. So as you can see, this is showing all the customers at the moment. If we just wanted to see customers that had actually bought or had credit notes assigned to them, we can actually just add a revenue filter, which just says where revenue is not blank. Should work. We'll check. It does. So now we can only see those 4 customers here. Something else we could do individual product, but let's just keep it like that for now. And let's do one other page. So this is our invoice sales detail page. Let's do another page where we can actually go in and see our top customers. So top customers and top products. Customers. Change this. And customers. So the way we're going to do it is we'll delete a lot of these. Let's just add the quantity and the revenue here. So obviously this is going to look a lot better if you had more data. There's not a huge amount of data in there at the moment. So I'll just do it like this. And we'll add the product category here. Actual, revenue actual. And then we're going to have another table which just shows our customers. Customer. Perfect. And then we're going to have one other table for our products. Product default code. For the sake of this, we'll just use that name column that's formatted in a weird way. Product description. Okay. So let's make that a bit smaller. All right. So, I mean, the way that you would use this is you would go in, you can filter your customers by revenue. Usually, this would actually be industry because here we've actually got customers twice, so it's not so relevant. But for the sake of the example, we'll just keep it like this because I don't actually have any customers assigned to an industry in Odoo yet. But let's just keep it like this. So we can go in, we can click Deco Addict, for example, who are our top customer. We can then see that here is what they purchased. They had 20 of our 2-seat sofas. That was 30 grand. And we've got the product code and all that stuff as well. Now, if you wanted to add the sales price in, it's really just as simple as saying, well, the sales price is going to equal the revenue divided by the quantity. So now we've got a sales price per unit, and then we could add that in as well. So as you'll see, like if we click on office design software, for example, that will then filter the other tables as well. So we can see who actually bought that product, how much of it did they buy, how much revenue did we generate from it, all that sort of stuff. And that works in every single table. We can click furniture and office, we can control click a customer, and we can really start to break it down and actually get some useful information out of it. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it. If you made it through the whole video, great work. I know it was a bit of a slog. But yeah, a lot of this stuff is really just getting in there and playing around with it, learning, what the different column names are, the different things that you might miss. Say, for example, the companies and that minor change we had to make with the revenue columns. Those are all things that you'll just learn as you go. But yeah, hope you got something out of it. If you have any questions, leave it in the comment section below. But yeah, I'll see you in the next one.